Chapter 20-23. Mr. Twerry never bothered to threaten us with any principle. After 2 or 3 more scuffles with our class, he just went straight to Miss Hafiz and told on us. She walked into the classroom one morning with irritation on her face. "Okay, IH, so why will you not behave in your Spanish class?" She put down the register and stood looking at us, waiting for an answer. We stared back at her with over-innocent faces, but after a while Marlon Peters grumbled from behind a book, "Miss, that man too racial, miss." "What was that, Peters?" asked Miss Hafiz. Goody-goody Alicia Henderson, who was always ready to carry news, and who sat right up under the teacher's table, reported, "Miss, he say Mr. Twerry too racial, miss." Children nodded and murmured in agreement. "And what is the meaning of this word, racial, class?" "That doesn't say very much. If you want to accuse Mr. Twerry of something, then the least you can do is get the right word. What is it you're saying about your Spanish teacher?" There was a brief hush, then some snickers. Then Doreen Sandiford shot up brazenly and said in her loud, hoarse voice, "Miss, he don't like black hen chicken, miss. He does only show us bad face, like if them Indian children doesn't play tricks in class, too, miss." Everybody was giggling from the time she said, "black hen chicken," but now Miss held up her hand for us to stop. Just at that moment, however, Marlon Peters was saying, behind his book, to his fans around him, "My father say the only good coolie is a dead coolie," and everybody heard, so everybody started laughing again. Miss was shaking her head weakly from side to side. The gang of boys at the back now seemed to be having their own private joke. Miss held up both her hands for all the noise to stop, and right away Marlon Peters stood up to speak, with Anand Prasad trying to pull him back down into the chair. "Miss, Prasad say." Prasad tried to clamp his hand over Peters's mouth. Peters grabbed both of Prasad's arms and held him in a tight, struggling hug while he rattled off, as fast as he could, "Miss, Prasad say he uncle tell him he want to go in South Africa and help them white people kill out nigger." Miss Hafiz was a small lady, but very tough, usually. Yet now, while Peters and Prasad boxed each other playfully and we laughed with glee, we saw her sink into her chair, holding her heart and gasping, "Lord have mercy." The laughing died down, because Miss looked really stricken. We stared at her and she at us. We hoped that Mr. Twerry was forgotten. "Well," she breathed, "I don't know what to say. But I will tell you that the word for all of that is not racial. It is racist, and it is not a laughing matter." "Racist, miss?" someone asked. "Miss, racist, is like over in America, or South Africa, miss. Like them Ku Klux Klan and thing. We not so, miss." The class agreed. Racist was the word for those wicked white people in South Africa and America. In our country we just had some people who were racial. Miss held her head and looked frantic. "What you mean, just? People talking about killing off one another and you laugh kya kya and you say, just? That is not, just, anything, that is racism, children, and it is dangerous. You really think it can be all right to want one another dead?" Miss obviously found this offense much worse than whatever we had done to Mr. Twerry. "Look," she said. "All the Douglas in the class, stand up everybody with one parent of Indian descent and the other of African descent." About 5 children stood up. Marlon Peters bobbed up and down, and one of his gang reported, "Miss, Peters say he's a half Dougla, miss. He grand father was a Indian." "Okay, Peters, stand up if that is true. Any more half Douglas?" 2 girls stood up. "Now," said Miss, "I saw all of you laughing and skinning your teeth just now. So you think it would be a big joke if one side of your family were to kill off the other side, eh?" "No, miss," they droned, for there didn't seem to be much else to be said. "Or, we could just divide the whole class into coolie and nigger, and let one half kill off the other." Miss stopped abruptly. "But the 2 of you still think it's a joke." We looked around, and Peters and Prasad were shooting imaginary guns at each other. We didn't laugh too loudly, for we knew that Miss would get even more upset. Everybody was relieved that she had gone off the topic of Mr. Twerry, and now, luckily, the bell rang before she could get back to it. She still hadn't seen about roll call. "Who was absent, apart from Anjani?" she asked, hurriedly filling out the register. As she got up to go, she made as if to say something to us, but then she only shook her head sadly, and left. Chapter 21. I went home on weekends until about the middle of the term. Then my father put his foot down. One Friday morning, with my bag already packed, I went to Miss Velma for the bus fare as usual. "I forget to tell you, Darling. Your father say he not sending you home this weekend. He give somebody the message for your grandmother already. Not sending me home. Mr. Cephas was keeping me here in this house for the weekend. I rested my bag of clothes on a chair, and opened my mouth to protest. But what was the use of protesting to Miss Velma? It was Mr. Cephas who was preventing me from going home. He had left poor Miss Velma to give me the news and he was safely out of the house. Miss Velma looked so sorrowful that I could not say anything to make her feel worse. All right, Miss Velma, I said, and took the clothes back into the bedroom. I went to school. Sitting in class, I could think of nothing but how to get away for the weekend. I worked out scheme after scheme. I would go on the bus and tell the driver that he would get his money next week. I would go home at lunchtime and beg Miss Velma to lend me the bus fare. Elle would go to Ma Zéline would surely help me. Aha, Ma Zéline. She and my grandmother would surely break my bones for harassing Ma Zéline and, worst of all, asking for money. Ma had told me to go and find Ma Zéline if I was in trouble. But only if you in real trouble, she had added. What she meant by real trouble she never said, but I knew it was to do with my father. Ma thought my father might do something really terrible to me, something she couldn't even talk about. I only saw it in her face every now and then as she questioned me about how he was treating me. I'm not sending you to harass the lady with every little stupidness, but you know that she will help you if something happen. Zéline don't want no child round her neck. If Ma Zéline wanted children she would have made some, Ma said. Or, her sister had about 20 hungry children and she could have taken any one of them that she wanted. But who say just because you name woman you must mind child? Not Zéline. Ma and my mother often talked about Ma Zéline. I heard Ma say that there were ignorant people in this world who counted a woman as nothing if she didn't have children. But Zéline, she said, was the rightest one for them. One of the stories I'd heard them tell was about how once, in the heat of a quarrel, another woman had taunted Ma Zéline about not having children. She called Ma Zéline a mule. Ma Zéline gathered up her skirt, pushed her face in the other woman's face, and said, yes. Look the mule, and turning around swiftly, she fired a terrible kick, backwards, at the woman. I had not been to see Ma Zéline since the day we came to town to register. It would be so good to visit her, not to ask for anything, but just to listen to her talk, look at her books, stroll through her flower garden. She would be glad to see me, I knew. If I couldn't go home for the weekend, maybe I would pay Ma Zéline a visit. Anjani slid into her seat next to me, flustered and puffing. I would wait till break time to tell her how Mr. Cephas planned to tie my foot for the weekend. So what you going to do? Anjani asked, her eyes wide with concern. Nothing, I said. I was calmer now. Spending the weekend in town wouldn't be so bad if I could visit Ma Zéline. Mr. Cephas was never home, and I could get Miss Velma to send me to the market or something. I would stay and make the best of a bad situation. And my bad situation was nothing compared to Anjani's. Here she was, ready to take on my troubles when she had so much to worry about, too much for one person. One of Anjani's worries right now was the midterm test coming up the following week. She had missed so many days that what we were doing in class now was like gibberish to her, and she didn't have all the textbooks to study and catch up. I had lent her my geography book to take home overnight. You learn the geography. I read a part in the bus going home yesterday. But this morning I couldn't get to read again, the bus was full and I had to stand up. Okay, lunchtime we will learn it, I promised. And then you will carry home the science book for the weekend. We wandered along the corridors until the bell rang. Chapter 22. That same Friday evening Mr. Cephas came home so early that he startled Miss Velma. I was sitting at the dining room table doing my homework, mainly revising for the midterm test. My mind was not on the work. I kept thinking of home and what everybody would be doing. The little children would be very disappointed when I didn't turn up. Ma might be worried. Mr. Cephas had sent a message, yes, but Ma didn't trust my father. She might be so worried that she might send Uncle Leroy for me. When I heard the car outside, my spirits lifted for a moment. I thought, wishfully, that it might be Uncle Leroy and Jay. Rampy's son Jay, who was a mechanic, had an old, sprawling, rusty American car that Pappy called a moving accident. Jay liked to tell people how a Yankee fella working down at the oil company had paid him $5 to just drive the old junk away, out of his sight forever. The whole of the volunteer football team would pack into Jay's car when they had to go and play a match against another village. Every now and then Uncle Leroy and Jay, and some other men and women from Succle Trace, would get into the car and go Limingen Junction, or La Puerta. Sometimes they would even put God out of their thoughts and drive all the way to the city in Jay's sputtering old junk. But it was not Uncle Leroy, only Mr. Cephas, coming through the door with a nervous smile on his face. I said good evening and turned to my books again. Doing your home lesson, eh? Yes, I said, with a face that put an end to all conversation. Michael crept in through the back door. He had come home from school and disappeared again shortly afterwards to God knows where. Sometimes he went to a neighbor's house to watch television. Wherever he was, he must have seen Mr. Cephas's car and sped home. Good evening, Daddy, he panted. So where you now coming from, mister? Nowhere, Daddy. Get your book and do your home lesson. Michael dived into the bedroom and came out again with his school bag. For the next hour or so, he sat at the table with a copybook in front of him, fidgeting, scratching his legs, and turning pages, until Miss Velma came to set the table and put him out of his misery. Mr. Cephas did not change his clothes and go back out again. Instead, he stayed home and cleaned his car. When he had eaten, he still did not go out. He sat in the drawing room, studying a newspaper. Miss Velma and I cleared the table. I knew that my father had come home early to make sure that I was there, and was staying home to prevent me from escaping. Once or twice he cleared his throat and shot me a glance as if he wanted to start a conversation with me but didn't know how. The next morning I got up and washed my clothes. Then I helped Miss Velma with the housework. Mr. Cephas woke up at about 10 o'clock and peeped out at me as I was sweeping the drawing room. I said good morning, as politely as I could. Mr. Cephas sat down to eat and then started shouting at Michael to get out of bed and take up his book. Michael appeared, dazed, at the bedroom door. Boy, Mr. Cephas snapped, what is your ambition? I don't know, Daddy, Michael replied. You don't know, you damn right you don't know. And I don't know why I feeding you and clothing you and spending money on you. Money that I work hard for. Why I should feed you and clothe you, boy. What you doing to earn your keep? Nothing, Daddy. Yes. Nothing self. Well, from this weekend you going to start to earn your keep. I not feeding any loafers and ingrates and all who think I does pick money off a tree. Go and wash your face and take up your book. Mr. Cephas ate his fill and got up. After a long spell in the bathroom and an even longer time moving about in the bedroom, he was stepping out through the front door, smartly dressed and smelling sweet, and still patting his hair down. It was clear that he was really going out, and not just around the corner. This was my time to go and visit Ma Zelline. Chapter 23. So, Team Merle, all this time you staying in La Puerta and not one day you can't say let me go and see if the old Sucuyant dead or alive. Ma Zelline was trying to look stern, but her eyes, as always, were full of laughter. My grandmother say not to bother you. And what you say, you find as botheration if you come and see me now and then. No, Ma Zelline, all right, so tell me what you doing in school. You studying your books, what they teaching you up there. Soon I was telling Ma Zelline all about our battles with the circus horse, the antics of Marlon Peters and his gang, Mr. Twerry, and Janie. She was interested in everything. She filled her pipe and settled back to listen, mostly chuckling at the stories that I told. But when I told her about Anjani, a cloud came over her face. She stopped puffing at her pipe and stared at me grimly. Then her eyes seemed to be looking straight past me as she shook her head from side to side. Bonjay, Lord God, she said to herself, that poor little girl will do something one day, and then all of them will hold their head and bawl. We sat in a heavy silence until Ma Zelline put her pipe in her mouth again and sucked on it. So what about Cephas, now, she inquired, adding under her breath, that old nastiness. I told her that my father was well. Yes, I know he well, he always well God ain't ready for he yet. I want to know if you well. He treating you properly, or he take you to make servant. I didn't know where to start, but the next thing I knew, vexation was tumbling out of me. I was talking very fast and almost at the top of my voice. I will stay there to go to school, but I don't want to stay there for the weekend. I want to go home, or else I not staying there. Ma Zelline gently laid a hand on my arm. Come, she said, let's go and get some juice, and then you will tell me about this thing. I followed her into the kitchen, where she poured 2 large enamel mugs of guava juice and listened to my tale of woe. Salad, the stingy dog, Ma Zelline fumed, just the 2 cents for you to pay the bus to go home. Don't want to put he hand in he pocket. Salad, not to worry with that, you hear, child. You just study your book, and one day you will have your own money. You will never have to ask no man for nothing. Well, I do declare. When he keep you here for the weekend, you just come and look for me, you hear, and take your mind off of he. I wasn't so sure what my father would think of that arrangement, but I promised Ma Zelline that I would come and see her. Then I thought I would take my leave, but Ma Zelline had other plans. So what we eating for lunch? I wasn't cooking today, pot turn down. Is so when you living in Bocce, you could turn down your pot when you want. Nobody to say, Zelline, where my food? Zelline, I hungry, but today I have guest. It was funny to hear Ma Zelline talk about herself as, living in Bocce. I had somehow thought that only a man's place could be called a bocce. That was what Uncle Leroy called his room, which had its own door and steps to the outside, and where we were not allowed unless he invited us in. He had built this room, with the help of his friends, onto the side of our house. I better go back now. I don't know when Mr. Seth is coming home, and he might be vexed, one explained. Fax. You gone by your grandmother Ma Kummer, you gone by Zelline. Ma Zelline is your grandmother, good friend. So you gone by your family. Cephas can't be so drunk as to vex with you for that. Come we juke down a breadfruit and make some oil down. Vex. Cephas know how you grow and get big. He know where you get food to eat till now. I don't know why your grandmother take you and give you to that worthless man. He don't deserve to have no child like you, to tell people about, my daughter. Since when he know he have daughter? Look here, Ma Zelline now fretted to herself in patois as she marched me off toward the back door. We went out through the door and round to the side of the house where there was a big breadfruit tree. Ma Zelline sighted a breadfruit that was about the size of my head, and just the right shade of green for picking. Using Ma Zelline's long bamboo rod with the cocoa knife at the top, we jabbed at its stem until the breadfruit came crashing down through the leaves of the tree. It fell with a loud thud, but it was firm enough and did not burst. In an old tub under the eave of the house Ma Zelline had a forest of herbs growing, and she picked some leaves of thyme while I went in search of a green pepper. Then we went into the front yard to cut some dasheen bush to put on top of everything in the pot: breadfruit, salt meat, seasoning, and coconut milk. Ma Zelline cut some leaves, then dug up a dasheen as well, which she weighed in her hand with pride. She moved around slowly and contentedly, and we chatted as we went. She wanted to know how my grandmother was, and then everybody else in the family. How your mammy, you writing to her? I told her how my mother had started to go to high school in New York. Well, praise God, I did always tell Patsy, don't mind you miss your chance as a young girl, you have your brains. You will get a chance again, and when you get it, is to take it. Praise God. Ma Zelline straightened up from bending over the dasheen patch. And you, now, you have the best chance. You see and do good. Don't mind no Cephas, no circus horse that dotish Velma and all will put a blight on you. Look how hard your mammy have to work to get a little education, and you get it right in your hand. Don't throw away that.